Lingchuan town is a famous porcelain producing area in the Dian dynasty, and there are many merchants buying goods from all over the world every day. The price of local house deeds has also risen, but it still can't stop the foreigners who make a living from coming here. No, in the spring breeze of February when the grass grows and the warbler is flying, another carriage drove up on the stone road on the north street of Lingchuan town. In the neighborhood of Lingchuan town, the mother-in-law who was idly gathered in a needle thread looked around and wondered what kind of family had moved to this blue tile house that had been idle for a long time on North Street. The carriage stopped in front of the somewhat old mansion, and a thin black-faced woman removed a small plum blossom stool from the back of the carriage, and then reached out and helped out from the curtain a seemingly 18 Fang Hua, a woman wearing a light smoky silk shirt. For some unknown reason, the woman was still leaning on a bamboo stick for mountain climbing. With the help of her mother-in-law, she slowly got off the carriage. After the woman got out of the car, she naturally glanced at the surrounding streets and alleys, so that people could clearly see her eyebrows and eyes like Hande in the distance. Seeing this, I can't help but cry out. There is such a beautiful woman in the world. Lingchuan town is located in the south of the Yangtze River and has been rich in beautiful women since ancient times. But this woman's beauty is different from the gentleness and softness contained in Jiangnan Water Village, but has a slender waist and long legs, tall and bright, especially the black bun that sets off her brows and eyes. But looking at the style of the bun, she should be married. Beauty is beautiful, but it makes people unable to feel close. I just feel that the beauty is so coquettish, and it should be raised in the deep palace under the sun, the Jade Palace and the Golden House. How could it be living in such a marketplace? The probe looked at Mrs. Yin for a long time. When the woman led the two wives and the driver into the courtyard, she was still unfinished and couldn't help whispering to the women who were sitting on the side. Said, "My darling, I have been crazy for so long, and it is the first time I have seen such a beautiful woman. This woman's official does not know what to do, and she has the ability to marry such a beautiful woman." The mother-in-law of the Zhang family said disdainfully, "What else can I do? 9 out of 10 people who come from other villages to buy houses here are businessmen who sell porcelain, ordinary craftsmen, but can't afford a whole house on this street." Hearing what she said, the wise man immediately squinted his eyes and said, "If that official is a businessman, he is also short-sighted. After earning some money, he does not know how high the sky is, and he dares to dare. Marrying such a beautiful woman, if she often excludes her from doing business, and leaves a maid Yaoi at home alone, how can this low wall and short door, how can you hold on to it?" She said this with allusions. There are many merchants' homes in Lingchuan North Street. Most of the men travel far and wide in pursuit of profit, and most of those merchants like to marry some fireworks women as concubines. Most of the business people who settle down here are not good. A virtuous wife. So the head of the wall was right at once. The doors and windows were opened at night, and there were frequent incidents of private meetings with local swingers. In the daytime, they gather in one place, and when they thread the needle, they communicate with each other, and talk about the shortness and ambiguous affairs of the parents who came from the house next door. And the beautiful woman who came here today, can't tell where she came from. Looking at it like that, it is also the root cause of troubles, causing trouble for men. Let's just see, which in Lingchuan town can knock on the back door of this Kingwei mansion on North Street. For a time, these local wives began to sigh again, denounced the foreign merchants' families for ruining the atmosphere of North Street, and they all advertised their own chastity, and they were glad that their men had good eyesight knowing people, marrying a virtuous wife as oneself, and chatting in full swing for a while. Not to mention the rap women in front of the neighborhood, looking at the newly built blue tile mansion. The beautiful woman has been hesitant and frowning since she entered the mansion. It seems that only the outer wall and the mottled gate of this house have not been repaired. Lu Miantang couldn't help but looked up again and looked at the blue-tiled mansion in this Sing Lado or courtyard, frowned slightly, and said hesitantly, "It's not that the officials have a lot of business losses, so they moved out as a last resort. Is it from the capital? Why did he buy such a good house here again? Before Miantang could finish her sentence, the black-faced old woman standing by the side interrupted her a little bluntly. The owner is a wealthy family for several generations, and the camel is more skinny than the dead camel. Ma, you can still afford such a small house. Madam, you have to worry too much. Miantang didn't speak, just rubbed the cane she was leaning on with her long slender fingers. This Mother Li has been arguing with herself many times. She doesn't know how she was in charge of the family before she got sick, but she always feels that she can't tolerate this. However, a serious illness not only drained her body, but also burned the memory in her brain. A lot of things, she doesn't remember well enough. All I remember is that my name is Lu Miantang, the youngest daughter of the Lu family of Paishan's former prominent family. She lost her mother at the age of 10 and has a brother 5 years older than her. Because the Lu family was squandered for several generations and the money was empty, her father arranged a marriage for her to make money. She married the Kui family, a merchant from the capital, and received an astronomical betrothal gift. I still remember how reluctant she was when she got married. She only felt that she was betrayed by her father. Fortunately, her husband has a good temperament. She did not hate her because of the panic attack when she first woke up, but asked Lang Zhong for diagnosis and treatment. The family wealth finally rescued her cruel life before the gate of hell. But she was lingering ill for a long time, and she spent a lot of silver. Since she fell ill and lost her memory, 1 year has been enough for Lu Miantang to calm down the hesitant mood after her amnesia. According to my husband, the Lu family was implicated in the Daishan Academy case 3 years ago. The father was convicted and executed, and the elder brother was also wrongfully imprisoned and sent to Lingnan. She was not surprised when she heard the bad news. The decay of the Lu family had already shown signs before she got married. Although her father ignored her neglect, he was blindly pampering her brother, donating money to buy officials, laying a hidden danger for the Lu family's disaster. Although it was 3 years ago, it was still a heavy blow to her who lost her memories of these years. After hearing about her father's tragic death and what happened to her brother, she was so uncomfortable that she couldn't eat for several days. The deceased has passed away, how can the living follow to die? The family members of the scholars who were killed by your Lu family and son did not seek death, and you starved yourself to death. Do you want to make amends for your father? These words were like sharp knives, which made her a little unstoppable, but it was also like a dago, pulling her out of her uncontrollable grief. The famous Lu family has long since ceased to exist. In this case, she can't use the excuse of being sick to distract her husband. Especially after listening to Mother Li's face telling her that in order to treat her illness, her husband was distracted, the store was not operated properly, and she lost a lot of money. Lu Miantang felt even more guilty. He intends to be his virtuous inner helper, so that the husband can operate with peace of mind and will not lose all his belongings. Now, she finally settled in Lingchuan town, which is her future home. But this Mother Li always seemed to treat her badly, as if she used to be unkind to her husband. Although the old slave made a fuss, Lu Miantang did not suffer. The Kui family is not as good as before, and all Ken left behind are loyal old servants. She was a newcomer, and it was not easy to take her mistress's hair and lose her Mother Li, which chilled the hearts of the servants next to her. But it's always a matter of hindsight. It's really not good, it's better to send Mama Li to work in her husband's shop. Thinking of this made her feel relieved. The days in the future may be like the spring breeze in February in Lingchuan. It is expected that after the coldness, it will be endlessly warm. Although Lu Miantang just arrived here, the boxes and cages of clothes were delivered early in the morning. It's just that the clothes and quilts are a little out of order, and they are scattered in the trunk. Lu Miantang called Li's mother to enter the house to sort out the boxes, but Li's mother's voice came from the small kitchen not far away. The boss will come in a while, and the slave's house must be organized first. Wine and food, that clothes can be packed up tomorrow. Mother Li choked again, but what she said was reasonable. and she couldn't ask her husband to come back and wait for the food. Lu Miantang had only 2 wives beside her, one was Mama Li, and the other was a dumb messenger. Now that the 2 women are chopping wood and cooking food, she has to do things in this house by herself. After getting sick, her legs and feet could not stand for long, so she simply moved a chair and sat under the window, folding clothes one by one. However, it is difficult for husband to do business now. It's good to have clothes and clothes. She doesn't pick these. But, the clothes in this cage are all hers, and there is no half-strained clothes of husband Kuiju. Hasn't your husband's luggage been brought in yet? Kui Miantang couldn't help but have some doubts in her heart. Just as she was thinking about pacing, there was the sound of a carriage rolling over the stone slabs in front of the door of the house, and then the sound of the door opening. Lu Miantang was sitting by the window, looking over her head, and after a while, a tall man walked around the screen wall in front of the house and strode in. The author has something to say. The article is open again. Welcome to Come to the Pit. Please have a loving discussion. With the essay, the mad boy will write attentively to give back to the love of the parents. Those eyes under the thick sword eyebrows are not angry. This is a handsome and threatening man. Under the tall nose, the corners of the thin lips seem to be smiling naturally, always slightly upturned, but it dilutes the chill in his eyes. Gloomy atmosphere. Lu Miantang still remembers that when she first saw him after a serious illness, the first thought that flashed in her heart was, although she looks good, she doesn't look like a peaceful person. After a bit of peach blossom, whoever becomes his wife will definitely feel tired. Still on the sickbed, she didn't know what to do, and soon found out that the retribution of belly slander was coming. The sachet she prepared before her marriage to give to her future husband was hanging brightly on the handsome young man with peach blossoms on his lips. In addition, she heard that the young man who consulted her called him Kui Juyi, so she vaguely guessed that she was the unfortunate lady who was destined to be tired. When she got a definite answer from Langshong's mouth, she also had mixed feelings and didn't know how to face this strange husband. At that time, she still couldn't say much, so she could only weakly watch Kuiju sitting beside her on the bed, and asked Lang Zhong carefully, how is her condition, and how long can she speak? The deep and magnetic voice makes people feel at ease. Just as she was thinking about it, Kuiju had already opened the door curtain and strode in. Seeing that she was staring at him blankly, her footsteps paused, and after a while of silence, she said lightly, I am back. Do the math, she and he have not seen each other for more than a month. It's a pity that she and Kuiju have been married for a few years, but now they have disappeared in her mind, and she will never give birth to her husband's long-term grievance and lovesickness feelings. However, she knew a little about the past from other people's mouths on and off, and only heard that the two have been loving each other since they got married. Although she was unfamiliar, she still remembered her husband Kuiju's hard work for the Lu family and her own help. She still got up and walked over, preparing to take off his cloak for him and dust off the dust. But before she could get close to her, Kuiju's long fingers had already unfastened the straps, and threw the satin cloak behind him on the bench beside him. Seeing that he had already sat down, Miantang went to the table to get a water glass and poured a glass of water for him. Mother Li is cooking in the kitchen, and before she can bring hot water, this pot it's not good to make tea warmly, please moisten your throat first. As he spoke, he followed the rules he had learned from the woman who taught her wife Taoism before he got married, and half bent down, raised the water cup to his forehead, and worshipped her husband. This is the etiquette that women in the world should have when they respect their husbands. Zhao Shanai said that when you are seriously ill, you are most afraid of cold, and you should avoid drinking such cold water. Speaking, he raised his voice and shouted outside the house, Mother Li, bring in the hot tea. Kuiju took the teacup offered by Li's mother, rolled up her sleeves and brushed the tea foam with the tea lid, and took a slow sip gracefully. In the past, when Lu Miantang was practicing the tea ceremony with her female master, she had heard the master talk about the way of drinking tea. At that time, when she saw the master's demonstration, she secretly admired it, but now, when she looked at Kuiju's elegant tea-tasting attitude, it seemed that the lady at the time was a little vulgar and pretentious. She only remembered that the Kui family was a wealthy family in the capital, but it was only a Kaogong boatman who made a fortune selling private salt. Unexpectedly, Kuiju, the son of a merchant family, had shares the style of the gentry. After Mama Li served tea, she withdrew respectfully, leaving Lu Miantang and Kuiju to sit opposite her husband and wife. In fact, there were not many times before the two of them were alone. When she was seriously ill and lingering on the bed, she was always served by the maid, and then when she recovered, Kuiju went out to run business again. The two of them were sitting opposite each other in the silent room, and she remembered that being a wife is not only about raising a case and raising eyebrows, but also flying together. Thinking of this, she was suddenly a little nervous. It was getting late now, but she didn't seem to be ready. However, after Kuiju put down the teacup, she gently asked about how she has been in better shape recently. Seeing that her husband was just chatting with her, Lu Miantang let out a sigh of relief and answered one by one. After asking a few gossips, Kuiju suddenly and inadvertently asked, "You are here for the first time, and tomorrow you will find time to walk around the town. If you see something you want to buy, just go and buy it." Miantang thought about it after listening to it and said, "I don't lack anything. There are so many people on the street. It's better to clean up and be quiet at home." The Kui family is now in the middle of the family, and the valuable shops in the capital are all sold. Now they come to Lingchuan town to do some porcelain business. The beginning of everything is difficult, and you need money everywhere. But she didn't want to hurt her husband's self-esteem, so she didn't say anything about going out and spending money. But speaking of this, she got up and took out her jewelry box from the luggage cage. There are 2 silver notes sent to her by her grandfather when she got married. When she woke up from a serious illness, the rest of the dowry was gone, only the head and face jewelry and this silver box handed down to her by her mother were pressed intact under her cotton mattress. Later, her husband's family was difficult, but Kuiju never opened her mouth to ask her for a makeup box. Now, Miantang took out one without hesitation and handed it to him. "Listen to Mama Li, you have now bought a new shop in the town, and you have a great plan, just around the corner. The dowry is not much, these individuals should be invested in shares, the shop opens, and I can also share some dividends with my husband." Back. Seeing that he didn't answer, Miantang put the banknote on the table and said with a smile, "In business, there is always a loss and a profit, so it is impossible that the world's money can still be earned by one person. Go. It's better for you to use it than for my eyes to be smeared." As he said that, he looked at him with hope, expecting him to accept it. Miantang is beautiful in the first place, but if the beauty is not psychic, it is just a jade carving, without soul. And when she smiled lightly, the unapproachable feeling of alienation like an iceberg beauty suddenly disappeared in a flowery smile. The 2 shallow dimples on her slender cheeks looked very sweet, and she had the feeling of an innocent little girl. Kuiju squinted slightly for a while, then reached out and picked up the silver note. "In this case, I'll keep it for you first. But the market still has to go, I'm already in the distribution. Okay, I ordered a few new pieces of cloth for you to pull clothes, you go and see, if you don't like it, change the look you like." Since it is her husband's caring heart, Miantang can't push it anymore, so she nodded. At this moment, Mama Li came to ask Julia if he had a meal. After hearing the owner say that the meal was set, she brought the meal with a lacquered wooden tray. Today's dishes are all Jiangnan style. The lotus root slices are fried with delicious fresh meat, golden and crispy, the beggar chicken exudes the fragrance of lotus leaves, and there is a tofu soup topped with crab yellow, which is delicious. Perhaps because of the return of the owner, the 9th master, Li's mother, who usually cooks sloppy meals, is extra careful today. Immediately, he filled a bowl of tofu soup in a small bowl, rehearsed the etiquette he had practiced before marriage, raised the case again, and presented it to the husband for use. Since then, every time I eat in front of people, I have always restrained 7 points. But now she only cares about herself, it really shouldn't be. There is not much money in the family now, and it is not often seen when the table is full of wine and vegetables. Husband is busy with business every day, and he must consume energy. He is in need of supplements. How can he eat more when he is idle at home? Thinking of this, she hurriedly put away the chopsticks and only chewed the rice. Kuiju didn't eat much, but occasionally picked up a few chopsticks. Most of the time, she watched Miantang eat her food. It's a pity that this lady of his is beautiful, but she eats with a wink, her cheeks bulging, and she is very focused. Accidentally, he didn't want to eat more, but he also ate a few more chopsticks. But later, maybe she was full, and she no longer used chopsticks to pick up vegetables. The two of them sat opposite each other, and they were not thinking about eating, so they seemed a little cold and speechless. After eating, Kuiju rinsed his mouth with fragrant tea, and said to her, "A new batch of goods has arrived at the dock, and I have to check it out. I won't be able to come back tonight. You are tired all the way, so you can rest after a while." Originally, Miantang had been secretly nervous about whether the two of them would sleep together tonight, but after hearing Kuiju say this, she let out a big breath and said in a slightly brisk tone, "Although it is Jiangnan, it is nighttime. It's also cold, so it's better if you dress thicker." As he spoke, he took out a small jacket he had sewn in the past few days and handed it to his husband. These days, seeing that she is in good shape and has nothing to do, she picks up the needlework lessons she had learned at her parents' house for more than a month, and according to the size asked by Li's mother, I added some cotton wool to the remaining fabric for her blouse, and finally made one. At this time, Kuiju calmly looked at the thick needle and thread on the jacket, and her eyes were indescribably intriguing. Lu Miantang felt a little regretful. She really shouldn't show her shortcomings. But her official looked at it for a while, and finally took it over, and took off her jacket, ready to try it on. Lu Miantang's eyes lit up, she became active again, and diligently helped her husband get dressed. Fortunately, the size was good, and it was a good fit. Against the background of Kuiju's tall and straight posture, the clothes are very stylish, and the rough stitches are not so eye-catching. So Kuiju put on his coat again and put on his cape again under the service of his good wife Miantang. Just when she was wearing the lace, Miantang saw that her long and graceful fingers were a little clumsy. She couldn't tie it well a few times, and finally tied a dead knot. Kuiju felt that her neck was a little tight, so she held the back of her neck with her big palm, and said with a slightly raised corner of her mouth, "Are you trying to strangle me?" He held the back of her neck, and her whole body was wrapped in his inexplicable fragrance. She was so close to him that she could clearly see his thick black curly eyelashes, and his deep eyes that seemed to be unable to smile. Miantang felt that the strength of his hand holding her was a bit strong, so he subconsciously used a small grabbing move, trying to remove his strength with his backhand. She said a little annoyed, "Didn't Dr. Zhao say I'm fine? Why don't you have the strength in your hands?" Retained the habit of practicing martial arts every day. But now it seems that her hands and feet are probably due to a serious illness, and she has been unable to keep the skills her mother passed on to her. Kuiju lowered her head and looked at the annoyance on her face, but relaxed her strength, slowly lifted her up, lowered her eyes and stared at her pale cheeks, slowly said, "Isn't it much better? Go out for a walk more, exercise your muscles and bones, maybe it will be better faster." Speaking of this, he thought for a while, and took out a small flat box from the inside. "This is the fragrance powder prepared by Jiangnan Hangxiang Jai, it tastes pleasant, you can add some to your makeup tomorrow." Color. Miantang took the exquisite and unusual box. This Hangxiang Jai is probably for the wealthy. It is different from the ordinary porcelain box for rouge gouache. It is actually gilt and inlaid with turquoise. Luxury style. Since it was her husband's will, she naturally wanted to accept it with a smile, but she sighed in her heart. The so-called transition from extravagance to thrift is difficult, probably like this. Husband is used to being extravagant, and spending money is still like running water. Now the family can't spend as much as in the capital. Another day, she will euphemistically tell her husband that there is no need for her to buy things like this that cost money. But when she took the powder box, she still smiled gratefully at him. Lu Miantang watched her husband's tall figure disappear behind the shadow wall of the courtyard. What she thought was, he looks very thin and gentle, but his hands are really strong, and his body is also very strong and handsome. It looks like he has also practiced martial arts. When she was in the capital, she was mostly in the yard, and it had been a long time since she walked out of the street. Thinking of going out for a walk tomorrow and seeing the customs of Lingchuan town, I am still a little excited. In the early morning of the next day, before she could get up, Mama Li entered the house with hot water for washing and called, "Madam, it's time to get up." Lu Miantang lazily got out of the quilt, thinking, I usually don't work, but today I am diligent, and I don't need to shout to serve people. It can be seen that because the husband returned home, the tired old servant also picked up the rules and worked hard. Since the hot water was brought, she couldn't stay in bed any longer. She just got up to wash her hair. On weekdays, Lu Miantang does not like rouge gouache. But yesterday's husband's intentions were not good enough to live up to, so he applied a little gouache and lightened his red lips. Mother Li looked at her through the bronze mirror, only to think that this woman was really dazzling, and that Zimei had a faintly enchanting aura. She couldn't help but snorted slightly. Lu Miantang was accustomed to the yin and yang of Li's mother, and while she was dressing, she inadvertently asked, "Mama Li, did I ever blame the servant before I lost my memory?" Mother Li wore a silver bracelet for her and replied, "Mrs. treats people kindly and never punished others severely." Miantang heard it, turned her head and smiled at her. "Since it never happened, why does Mama Li always get angry at me, and seems to be dissatisfied?" Mother Li didn't seem to expect her to be so outspoken. After a moment of stunned, she gritted her teeth, knelt down and said, "The slave's family is from the countryside, and his words are vulgar. If he is not thorough, please forgive me, madam." Seeing that Li's mother admitted her mistake, Lu Miantang didn't want to take any serious blame, and only asked her to get up. "I am young, and now I am seriously ill. Earlier, I couldn't take care of myself when I got up." No wonder people broke the rules and didn't take her seriously. Mother Li is the old man of the Kui family. It is said that she grew up watching Julia. In this case, she should not take too much responsibility for her husband's face. Since she is also interested after beating her up, that's it. After finishing the outfit, she drank the gruel, picked out a dress with dark flowers on a white background that was not too faded, and put it on, and then she was ready to leave the hospital and get on the carriage. But Li's mother said, "Yesterday, when the owner left, I specially instructed the old slave to let my wife walk out of the street today. Zhao Shanai said that if you walk more, your hands and feet will recover better. It is good." So Lu Miantang took Mama Li out of the blue tile house. It was already past breakfast time. The men in North Street went to work early, and the women who sewed in North Street also gathered at the door to bask in the sun. The eloquent Mrs. Yin saw the beautiful woman in the Qingwei courtyard came out, and immediately greeted her familiarly, "How dare you ask this little lady?" Lu Miantang knew that these were all neighbors. Even if the Kui family was not down, they were just businessmen. So she stopped and smiled slightly, "My husband's family name is Kui, just call me Mrs. Kui." However, Mrs. Yin was still not satisfied, and continued to ask, "What do Mrs. Kui's officials do, and where did they come from?" Miantang replied with a smile, "The officials are businessmen who have moved from the capital." After speaking, he wanted to leave. But Mrs. Yin stood up and asked, "Since you are a businessman, where did you set up a shop?" This Lu Miantang couldn't answer. She couldn't help but look back at Mama Li. "Speaking of which, She also asked Mama Lee about this. Mama Lee vaguely said that it was in the town, but it was not clear where it was. Now that my neighbors are asking, I naturally want Mama Lee to answer. When it came out of blue and purple, he just stared at him for a while and said, the slave family guards the lady all day, and it is not clear where the shop is. Seeing that she didn't ask the new neighbor's wealth, Mrs. Yin was unwilling, but she still warmly said, my lady, don't think I talk too much, it's true that we ladies are the old people in the town. The feng shui geometry of the shop is very familiar to me. If you have any doubts in the future, you will come to me and ask, I will definitely know everything about it. Farewell to the enthusiastic new neighbor, Miantang can finally walk out of North Street smoothly. Although Ling Shui is a small town, it is very lively with merchants from all over the world. But her mind was not on the stalls with all kinds of goods. Neighbors who don't know each other know what to inquire about, but she, the wife of the family, doesn't know when she asks 3 questions, which is really embarrassing. Mama Lee, if your husband's servant comes back to fetch food today, remember to ask where the cupboard is. Your husband is working day and night, so 3 meals should not be in time. Tonight, you cook something delicious. I will send it to my husband in person. Listening to what Madam said, Mama Lee's black face seemed to have overturned another jar of soy sauce, and hesitantly said, the boss is busy with work, and won't be back for a few days. Madam, don't need to worry, the servants around the owner are all attentive and take care of people. Lu Miantang smiled slightly, stopped talking, and continued to walk forward. Dian's folk customs are open, and most women do not wear a hood when they travel, especially in the south of the Yangtze River. Miantang follows the customs of the countryside, as well. However, she is tall and has bright facial features. Today, she wears fende lightly. She is really provocative in the street market, which attracts passers-by and vendors around her to look back frequently, and whisper about which lady she is. Could it be that a fairy from the sky descended into the mortal world? To the extent that Granny Lee was protecting her, it was a little difficult to move. Seeing that the beautiful woman with the face was single, and there was no male follower, she must not be a lady from a big family, so she boldly stepped forward to molest her. Woolen cloth. Lu Miantang glared at him. I saw a with a blue shirt and a turban. He looked like a local rich man, and there were 2 smiling little servants behind him. Being stared at by Lu Miantang like this, the libertine's muscles and bones were numb, and the little servant on the side was used to picking flowers for the master, and said with a smile, what is the name of the little lady? Our son is Ling Chuan. The nephew of the guard, you are familiar with our son, and there will be many benefits in the future. Lu Miantang didn't say a word, and Li's mother seemed to be frightened, and bowed her head and followed behind her without saying a word. Those scumbags were tightly wrapped around them. From the looks of it, Lu Miantang wouldn't let him go if he didn't get on the sedan chair. Lu Miantang didn't feel panic in her heart. She had always been so outgoing since she was a child. She was used to seeing such a rogue. When she was at her mother's house, Miantang occasionally sneaked out to play with her maid. When encountering a mad bee and a butterfly, he basically stretched out his hand, pulled his neck and collar into the dark alley, loosened his muscles and bones, and waved his fists and feet, beating him so much that neither his parents knew him. But now, after she was seriously ill, she had no strength in her hands and feet, but she couldn't perform her full-hearted tactics. But if you let this sly prank play, it's really against her way of being a human being. So she put her hands together and gathered her hair, half bit her lip, said nothing, turned and walked into the small room beside her. Lane. When the guard nephew saw it, he was instantly delighted. He knew in his heart that it was a dead end. The beautiful woman entered the alley and wanted to go out. Thinking of this, he turned around and winked at the servants. The servants understood and immediately asked the bearer to come and guard the alley. Then the 2 doglegs followed the master into the alley. The little lady looked at her stubborn temperament. The libertine's eyes were shining with ecstasy, and as soon as he entered the alley, he couldn't wait to hug this beautiful woman from behind. However, Lu Miantang turned around suddenly, a silver light flashed in his hand, and a sharp object suddenly pierced his neck. When everyone saw it clearly, they found that the object was the silver hairpin on the beauty's head. In the first step, I immediately killed his dog, and then I will see how you guys go back and do errands. No. I saw that their son was only stabbed by a small silver hairpin, but he was already kneeling on the ground, his mouth and eyes were askew, long saliva was spit out from his mouth, and his eyes were rolled, which was very scary. The two servants are just servants. If something happened to the son they followed, they would definitely not be able to escape the relationship. Seeing this, they were so frightened that they didn't dare to move. One of them said boldly, "Da bold shrew, you dare to touch a hair of our son, and you can't eat and walk around." Lu Miantang is not afraid of this kind of threat. When she came to Lingchuan town, she sometimes stayed on the boat overnight. She heard travelers on the waterside lighting a bonfire and chatting, saying that Lingchuan town was under the jurisdiction of Zhenzhou. The new owner of the Zhenzhou fief was the king of Huaiyang, who inherited his father's business. He was young and promising, and he ruled the army very strictly. The guard in Lingchuan town condoned his nephew to molest a good woman on the street, and when she looked back, she didn't tell the officials, and went to the Huaiyang palace to sue the guard. Seeing that his son was pinched by a hairpin of that delicate little lady, the two servants couldn't say anything harsh, they only cried and begged the little lady to stop stabbing, raise their hands, and let their son go. At this time, Mama Li, who had been silent behind Lu Miantang, also spoke up, "Madam, officials still have to do business, don't make trouble." Lu Miantang turned her eyes slightly, looked at the corner of the alley, smiled slightly, and said to the two gangsters who helped the emperor, "It's easy to let your son go, as long as you do. Is it good enough?" In addition to her official Kuiju, at this time, she did not sit on the pavement and bury her head to manage the bills, but sat on the Canghai mountain pavilion by leaning on the railing, drinking wine with friends against the rushing river. At this time, the river is full of waves, and there are constant passenger ships coming and going in the distance. Zhao Chuan, a friend beside him, said with emotion, "Just 2 years ago, water bandits were rampant here, which made the merchants feel frightened." "Great work." Kuiju casually drank a cup without saying a word. Zhao Chuan knew in his heart that he must be annoyed by those old and immortal courtiers in the capital who participated in his illegal deployment of troops. Therefore, Zhao Chuan opened his mouth to persuade, "Xing Zhou, you don't have to worry about the words of the officials. Long live, you should know that the bandits in Zhenzhou are not peaceful now. If you don't station troops, the rebels will fight long ago. If you go to the capital, if you take the crime of ruling the monarch in this matter, the law of heaven is unfair, and it will be difficult to convince the public." But Kuiju still didn't talk to him, rubbing the glass leisurely, not knowing what he was thinking. At this moment, a thin black-faced woman was led to the front by the guards, stood beside the mountain pavilion, knelt down and saluted, "My lord, there is something to report to the slave family." Kuiju. To be more precise, Kui Xing Zhou, who had just inherited his father's business and succeeded the king of Huaiyang, listened to it, and said calmly, "Today you accompany her to the market, what is there abnormal?" The black-faced woman is Mama Li, who should have followed her back to North Street to make a fire and cook. After the incident in the dark alley, Lu Miantang had no intention of going to the cloth shop to buy fabrics, so she brought her mother back home early. Mama Li saw that she couldn't wake up after falling asleep, so she went out and got on the carriage to report to the master. When she heard the prince's question, she returned respectfully, "There are some situations, so I will report back to the prince." Speaking, he will tell the story of encountering pranksters out of the street. Kuiju's eyebrows didn't move, her handsome face was expressionless, she just listened quietly to her experience in the dark alley. Zhao Chuan on the side felt distressed for the woman who could only fight to protect herself. But when he heard that Miantang used a silver hairpin to pinch Poppy in the dark alley, he couldn't help raising his eyebrows in astonishment, and couldn't help but ask, "Then did she let Poppy go?" Mama Lee recalled the situation at that time. She couldn't help retching, and immediately said, "Let it go." "What did she do to them?" Huayang King Kui Sing Zhou, who had been silent for a while, suddenly spoke up. Mother Lee had a weird face, and seemed to want to vomit again. Her face turned purple, and she said, "She let those two little servants eat in the alley." Thinking of the situation where the two little servants helped the son to rush out of the alley, looking for water to rinse his mouth, Mama Lee felt that her meals this year would not be sweet. Such an answer is really unexpected and makes people wonder what to say. Zhao Chuan was serving food, but after listening to the old lady, he lost his appetite and immediately put down his chopsticks. Kui Sing Zhou waved his hand and ordered her to go down after listening to Li's mother's report. But Li's mother still had something to report, and quickly said, "She always asks the slave's house, where is the official shop, and to see the situation, she has to go in person. Now look at this woman, it's too dangerous. According to the slave family, the Lord will tell the truth, don't accompany her anymore, and don't let her get close." The king of Huayang raised his head and glanced at Li's mother. His eyebrows did not move, and his tone was calm. "Li mother, do what this king ordered you to do." His volume was not loud, but Mama Li's face was straight, and she knelt down in fear. Although she watched the prince grow up, she also knew best that the prince could not be controlled by others from childhood to adulthood. As a servant, she is really a lot of words. At this moment, Kui Sing Zhou instructed the guard on the side, "Go to the town to buy a shop, and then sell some porcelain to put it on, and go back and tell Mama Li the address." The subordinates on the side listened to the instructions of the prince, and led the order down the mountain. And Li's mother also turned back to the town's north street. Janice Ho said with a wry smile, "Sing Zhou, she has completely lost her memory and doesn't remember the character of the rebel Lu Wen. You will lose the way of a gentleman by taking her weak woman as bait." Kui Sing Zhou didn't even look at his friend Zhao Chuan, just picked up the glass and said coldly, "When you were the initiator, it was your brother Zhao who made her mistakenly think that this king is her husband? How did Zhao Chuan know that a random joke at the beginning would turn into today's situation?" He had no choice but to say to his friend, "My ninth master, you hurriedly sent me to see and treat her. When I asked who she was, you refused to tell me. I saw her appearance. May, I just thought it was Hanjian where you met. Later, when she was able to speak, but you weren't there, she heard me jokingly call you Kui Zhuyi, so she asked me who Kui Zhuyi was from her, and then she picked up a sentence. It's the girl's sweetheart. Zhuyi, you didn't deny what happened in the future, did you?" Kui Sing Zhou looked at the time, put down the wine glass and prepared to go down the mountain and board the boat. These days, the war against bandits is fierce, and he has to return to the commander's tent to preside over the overall situation. When I came to Lingchuan town this time, in addition to personally choosing porcelain for her in the name of my mother, I also took the steps to secure the thief's amnesiac wife Lu Miantang. When the seriously injured woman was captured by accident, Kui Sing Zhou collected materials on the spot and brought Zhao Chuan, an idler who came to visit friends and was proficient in medicine, to respond to the emergency. However, after the woman woke up, because of a purse hanging on him and Zhao Quan's misleading, she mistakenly recognized him as the husband she should have married Kuiju, the businessman. As for the future, it will be wrong. He never said he was her official. But it was the woman who broke her brain and was so stupid that she mistaken it. After all, a hostile woman, although she has no power to tie the chicken, will inevitably have troubles. It's better to make her mistakenly think that she is the daughter-in-law of the Kui family, a businessman, and it would be easier to move to Lingchuan town. It is reported that the anti-thief Lu Wen is very fond of this girl. If she shows up in Lingchuan town not far from the thief's nest, she will definitely lead the snake out of the hole. However, I didn't expect that the woman even hit a hand. This kind of kung fu to control the enemy through acupoints requires several years of practice. Thinking about the well-behaved and virtuous woman named Miantang who lowered her eyebrows and pleasing to the eye in front of her, she couldn't tell it was a delicate flower with thorns. The corner of Huaiyang King Kuizing's whose mouth was colder. Zhao Chuan looked at Kuizing's whose sneer-like expression, and secretly pinched a cold sweat for the poor woman who had lost her memory. Because of guilt, Zhao Chuan tried to be a gentleman who protects the flowers. Xing Zhou, didn't you send someone to find out her details? She is just a good family woman, although she is with her mother. Learning some sticks, fists, and kicks, she is a delicate woman, it's just not useful. When she married into the capital, she was robbed by robbers halfway, and she became the thief's Mrs. Yazai. She was pitiful. Now her meridians are unstable. It is indeed the pulse of amnesia and ischemia, and she has no knowledge of the past. When the thief is caught, how will the Lord arrange her? Kui Xing Zhou didn't seem to want to say more on this issue, just got up and said lightly, a sinner's daughter, and a rebel wife and concubine, why should brother Zhao worry about her? After he finished speaking, he got up first and left. Zhao Chuan sighed and looked at the back of King Huaiyang hurriedly walking away, and sighed again in his heart, Ching Ching, beautiful lady, Nai was not lucky. Amorous, ruthless, and in the hands of King Huaiyang, who does not understand pity for fragrance and jade. He looked up to the sky and sighed, feeling that the beauty was ill-fated and had her own responsibility. Let's see if Kuizing's whose servant will be in a good mood and be kind after the bandits are killed. When the time comes, he will definitely ask Mrs. Xiao Miantang to come, take her as a concubine, and properly accommodate her for the rest of her life. Thinking of this, Zhao Chuan felt relieved, and took the wine glass and poured himself. Unlike Xing Zhou, the pillar of the imperial court, in addition to specializing in medical science in his life as an idle marquis, it is best to have this cup. Besides, King Huaiyang went down the mountain to the dock, and when he boarded the ship, he suddenly stopped, looked at the water for a while, and said to the servant, order someone to prepare a carriage and return to Lingchuan Town. When the carriage returns to Lingchuan Town, the first update has been set, and the moon and stars are rare. Lanterns were also hung in front of the blue-tiled house on North Street. When Kuizing's whose servant Moru knocked on the door knocker, she startled Mama Li who opened the door. She really didn't expect her master to come back again. Before she could speak, Miantang's voice came from the courtyard, Mother Li, but the official is back. There is no way, the house is not big, the sound of the front door can be heard clearly in the inner courtyard. Li's mother looked at the face of the prince, and could only reluctantly say, it's the boss who is back. At this moment, I heard the sound of the inner courtyard, and Miantang's slightly flustered voice came, wait, officials, the house is very messy, let me clean it up. Unfortunately, before Miantang finished speaking, Kui Xing Zhou had already lifted the curtain and pushed in the door. Just now she heard the sound of the door of the house, so she thought of wiping her feet quickly, so as to decorate her appearance and greet the officials. Where did he think that the officials' legs were long, and there were no 2 or 3 steps, and he had already walked in. Before Kui Xing Zhou entered the house, he was thinking about scrutinizing this woman. Since she remembers the ability to poke acupuncture points, will she also regain some memory? And if Lu Miantang regained her memory, she would either want to run away, or lurking beside her with evil intentions. That's fine, if she escapes, she can follow her path and send someone to follow her secretly. But if she wants to assassinate, he will give her enough opportunities to take her. At that time, each other will also save the long-winded play of the house wine, and it will be easier to find out the story of the anti-thief from her mouth. Kui Xing Zhou has always been a decisive person. How to judge this woman, I had an idea in my heart early in the morning. But after the condensed eyes entered the inner room, it was stagnant. Half exposed, so bright and white that people can't take their eyes off. This time, Mian didn't care about wiping it, so she quickly stepped on her sandals, rolled up her long hair to greet him, bent down and saluted. I don't know if the official came back tonight, and he didn't ask his mother to prepare meals. I don't know the official. Has anyone ever filled their stomachs outside? Her greeting is standard, but it can be seen that her legs are weak and clumsy. After all, after she woke up, her hands and feet were abolished, and it was impossible to be as agile as ordinary people. I really don't know how she managed 3 big men in the daytime. Kui Sing-jo looked at her wanting to show off, took off her cloak, picked up a chair and sat down, and asked peacefully, I'm out of the street today, but are you still having fun? Mian felt that she had to be brave if she dared to do it, not to mention that she had a good time in the dark alley, but it left the officials in trouble. It was indeed her fault that she calmed down afterwards. So she pursed her lips, and after offering her husband a cup of tea, she honestly told what happened today. Of course, she was extremely vicious and forced to eat shit, and I will not mention it, lest officials misunderstand that she is a poisonous woman. But after Mian finished speaking, Kui Xing's eyebrows didn't move, and he lowered his eyes and blew the tea stem on the teacup. That handsome face was like still water, and there were no undulations, and it was quite bottomless. So she made small steps all the way, walked to the desk and fetched the adverbial words she had written after waking up in the afternoon, biting the pen and showing it to the officials. If that kid knew he was wrong, he would be fine. But if the dog takes advantage of the power of the people and comes to seek trouble again, it is necessary to let the husband go to the county to file a complaint, lest the guards come to ask the guilt first. Kui Sing-jo didn't expect that this distressed lady would still write a paper in a leisurely manner after such a mess today, and finally raised her eyebrows slightly, stretched out her long fingers and pinched the letter to read. In all fairness, the writing is ugly enough. I don't know what this young lady studied when she was in her boudoir. She seemed to be not good at needlework, calligraphy, and painting. The official prestige of the King of Huaiyang, every word is concerned for the country and the people. Lu Miantang took the pen, paper, and inkstone while the officials were watching, spread out the letter paper and said, My words are ugly, they are not elegant, and I ask the officials to work hard. Transcribe and polish it for me, or submit it to the county. Thinking of this, he gently put down the letter and said, Didn't you hurt the guard's nephew? I really want to elaborate, I'm afraid you will pay that young master for the soup. When she heard that she wanted to move money, Miantang frowned and said softly, Although I heard that the King of Huaiyang was an upright lover of the people, it is indeed a bit of a disadvantage to sue the official with the people. I don't have much money, if Lao Jinzi blackmailed the family, it would be bad. Husband, I was wrong, please punish. Speaking of this time, Miantang was really sad, her eyes were slightly red, like a child who did something wrong. She looked at Kui Sing-jo timidly. However, the King of Huaiyang came all night, not to have a family drink with her, but to pick the key points, and asked Wen Yan, You are so good at subduing that young master, who taught you? Of those who don't know Kui Sing-jo will think that he is a tolerant and taciturn person. Since Lu Miantang came back, she has been worried that she might get into trouble for a while. However, seeing that her husband Kui-ju did not show disgust on his face, he did not shout loudly. She couldn't help but secretly rejoice that she was married to such a gentle gentleman. Now listening to him ask, Miantang said honestly, Zhao Shanai left me a book of massage acupuncture points, the acupuncture points in it are clearly marked, I was lucky today, one hit, without humiliating the reputation. If you want to drink water, you can't call anyone. Fortunately, Zhao Shanai is a good person. Seeing that she was bored, he brought her a few idle books to kill, and also gave her a medical book for self-massage, blood circulation, and stasis. In order to prove that what she said was true, she took out the scrolls from the bedside that Zhao Shanai gave to her husband. Because she had to see it along the way, she also asked Li's mother to help her wrap the leather with cloth, which she cherished very much. Cinnabar callouts. Lu Miantang deliberately stayed closer to the officials, and pointed at the small words with her slender fingers. I asked the genius Dr. Zhao to mark it for me. I was just bored to kill time. I didn't expect to use it today. The ancients said that it is beneficial to open the scroll, and it really makes sense. Where is this medical book? After being marked in such detail by Zhao Chuan, it is clearly the killer's handbook. A weak woman can follow the picture and pull out the hairpin to kill. Although he knew that Zhao Chuan was heartless, he still had the urge to put his friends in jail, and serve them with tongs and irons to see if he could get through to Zhao Chuan's wisdom. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but look coldly at Lu Miantang, who was helping him turn the pages. Still pity. It's no wonder that Zhao Quan's color was dizzy and he lost his mind. But Lu Miantang didn't know that Kuiju was scolding her mother, so she asked attentively again, "Is your husband hungry? Would you like to ask Mama Li to cook a bowl of noodles for you?" Although Kuiju drank on the mountain pavilion, he did not eat to fill his stomach. He came all the way down the mountain, and by this time he was really hungry. So, without waiting for Lu Miantang's order, he raised his voice, "Mama Li, bring some food." Unfortunately, the master turned back suddenly, and Mama Li was not prepared. She was in a hurry, and there was no ingredients in the kitchen, so she could only serve up the food that Lu Miantang cooked at night. Today's dinner was dried radish bought from the street, soaked in water, sprinkled with a pinch of salt and stirred, in addition to a piece of local moldy tofu. Hot oil, pour it over and eat it. Although Kui Sing Zhou is not very particular about food, she did not expect that what Li Mama brought was such a rough meal. If it wasn't for a bowl of white rice, it would really be a prison meal for sinners in prison. However, Lu Miantang is very calm. In her opinion, it is natural to save as much as possible. But seeing Kuiju frowning slightly, she shouted for Li's mother to bring the sesame oil, while persuading the eloquent official, "Husband has come to a new land, raising your hand will cost money, and you must be diligent and thrifty on weekdays. It's too late today, and eating too much hurts the stomach. Husband, let's eat it first. The moldy tofu drizzled with sesame oil is very refreshing. If you are not used to it, tomorrow I will ask Mama Li to go to the street to buy glutinous rice chicken for you to eat." How could Kui Sing Zhou not hear this little woman coaxing the gluttonous child? He sneered inwardly, but he picked up the bowl and ate a simple bowl of rice with dried radish in silence. Lu Miantang diligently mixed moldy tofu with sesame oil, and poured a cup of hot tea for Kui Sing Zhou. After dinner, it was getting late. Kui Sing Zhou knew that if he said that he would go to the bed and set up an account at this time, he would not believe it if he broke his brain. So when the meal was over and the tableware and chopsticks were all removed, the room returned to silence for a while, and Zhou Yikui slowly said, "I'm a little tired today, so let's rest early." Although Lu Miantang had long expected that the officials would be sleeping in her house today, but when she heard him say that, her heart beat a drum, and she felt her heart pounding. Fortunately, within a year after her serious illness, she had long accepted the fact that she was Kuijuzi. Although she was shy, she was not good at pushing officials out. She pursed her lips, hurried to the bed, straightened the quilt, and then turned to ask, "Which side is your husband used to sleeping on?" Kui Sing Zhou said lightly while drinking tea, "I can sleep on the outside." Because there is no Kui Sing Zhou clothes in the house, he naturally can't change clothes and sleep as usual. Although he was separated by a quilt, he could still feel the body of the fragrant woman beside him was a little stiff, and he didn't know if he was not used to it, or was thinking about when he would attack him. In fact, Lu Miantang is now full of regrets. Why did she ask him? Just let him sleep in it. In the evening, because the dried radish mixed with Mother Li was too salty, she drank a pot of water after dinner. Thinking that you must wake up at night, crawling around like this, wouldn't it disturb the husband's sleep? Thinking of this, she couldn't help but turn slightly to check her husband's movements. At this time, the window in the house entered the house with a clear moon, illuminating the tip of Kuiju's nose. My husband was so close to her that he could touch her with his fingertips. Lu Miantang heard his steady breathing, and a sweetness suddenly appeared in his heart. Since she was seriously ill, although her husband took good care of her, he never had with her again. At first, she felt a little relieved. After all, she didn't want to sleep with a completely stranger husband. But after a long time, she fell into deep worry. Fortunately, now that they have settled in Lingchuan town, officials don't have to run around. She also has to clean up the hesitant mood after losing her memory, be his wife steadfastly, and her husband should have children at his age. Thinking of this, Lu Miantang felt her cheeks suddenly become hot, and slowly reached out and touched Kuiju's hand. Unlike her slender hands, his big palms have distinct muscles and bones, which can completely wrap her. The husband did not move, he seemed too tired and had already fallen asleep. Lu Miantang felt relieved and placed her hand in his big palm with confidence. This year has passed, and only at this moment did she suddenly feel like a serious married couple. And NBSP, it's nice to have a coat ironed. Especially remember to tell Mama Lee to buy glutinous rice chicken for her husband to eat. Thinking about it, Miantang folded her hands in his and closed her eyes and fell asleep sweetly. When Lu Miantang fell asleep next to her official, Kuiju finally slowly opened her eyes. He rarely regrets anything, but at this time he really felt that he should not come here late at night. Originally thought that this woman would take advantage of her deep sleep, she would act, and she planned to do something wrong, but she just put the tender jade hand into her big palm and fell asleep like that. By the moonlight, he turned his head to look at the past, and was close at hand to a beautiful 18-year-old woman, with long hair pouring on the pillow, long breath, and slept coquettishly and unselfishly. No. Kui Sing Zhou looked at it for a while and felt that the temptation was over. Although it was late at night, it was time to leave to catch up with the military camp training in the morning. But when he wanted to pull his hand, the woman beside him made a humming like a milk cat, only hugged his arm and rubbed it, and continued to fall asleep soundly. The king of Huaiyang lay on his side and looked out the window. After thinking for a while, he suddenly felt tired and closed his eyes again. Since he has come, there is no need to toss and go. Night Road, let's make arrangements for tomorrow. The moon and stars were sparse the night before, and it was dripping with light rain in the second half of the night. The raindrops knocked on the window lattice, making people sleep extra sweet. But because of something in her heart, or because she slept too long yesterday afternoon, Lu Miantang got up early with the drizzle. At night, Lu Miantang really woke up, because the official was in the house. She was embarrassed to use the gong bucket in the house, and deliberately ran to the gong room behind the courtyard outside the house with an umbrella. She asked in surprise, and Li's mother held Ao Hong's eyes and said that the owner is back and must be served, for fear that the owner and his wife will not be able to call anyone with water at night. Sure enough, the old servants are loyal and can't be criticized. However, if you ask for water this night, it seems to have a different meaning, making Lu Miantang blush again. Folds. But he stayed in bed. After Lu Miantang got up, he slept for an hour before getting up. When she woke up, a pair of handsome eyes were still bloodshot, and she couldn't see the appearance of sleep and fatigue. Lu Miantang looked a little distressed while serving the officials to wash their faces. After the Kui family fell into disrepair, officials must be exhausted, running around for a living, and can't sleep peacefully, right? However, when the official woke up, he didn't complain, and even if he was wearing obscenity clothes, he washed his face and rinsed his mouth as gracefully and calmly as in a Confucian shirt. Lu Miantang admired Kuiju's gentleness and elegance, so she picked up the clothes that the officials hung on the screen, and ironed the coats herself, hoping to make the officials more zhuzheng when they left the house some. But after the fire bucket was filled with charcoal, it was a little heavy, Miantang's wrist was weak, and some couldn't hold the fire bucket, which made Li's mother look shocked. For fear that she would overturn the fire bucket and burn it out, he took off his master's coat, preventing him from going out decently. So he stole my Antang's work. Taking advantage of Li's mother ironing her clothes, Lu Miantang first served the officials with the hot porridge that had just been boiled, and then placed the delicate side dishes brought by the mute woman on the table, and then said, "Where is the official shop? You didn't eat well last night. At noon today, I will ask Li's mother to roast pork, and I will send it to you at noon." Although Kui Sing Zhou instructed the little servant to buy a shop yesterday, but he has not replied yet, how can he tell this non-existent shop? Perhaps it was because I didn't have a good rest last night. Zhu Yi's always warm and jade-like face was a little gloomy. Hearing her question, he didn't bother to deceive her, so he simply said, "I made a decision earlier." The original shop owner went back on it and refunded the deposit. Right now, there is no shop. Lu Miantang was a little angry when she heard this. She put down her chopsticks heavily and said, "Which businessman, why are you so untrustworthy?" Kui Sing Zhou didn't say anything, and drank his bowl of white porridge attentively. Lu Miantang consciously lost her composure, adjusted her sitting posture quickly, and said reservedly, "Husband, please don't get angry. She speaks the truth." In her opinion, although officials are good people, they are naive as children of wealth, and it is evident that even the finalized shop was forced to cancel the subscription. As his wife, she should not pick up jokes on the side and help him by herself to be worthy of the word virtuous. So Lu Miantang added, "Officials, Kunming neighborhoods are all old local residents, you can ask them. Choosing a store is a big deal, so don't be too hasty. Since the owner of the store regrets it, it's better to buy it after careful consideration." Listening to what she said, Kui Sing Zhou also saved the trouble of tricking her into going out, and said gently, "I'm going to the neighboring county to socialize. Since you have nothing to do, then the matter of choosing a store is all it takes. Give it to you." Lu Miantang listened to her heart, but she blinked a pair of charming eyes, hesitantly said, "I was seriously ill before, and I can't remember many things. What if I mess it up?" Miantang turned a deaf ear to her husband's innuendo in the first half of the sentence, but felt that in the second half of the sentence, the heroic man who returned after all the money was very manly. Although the family is in the middle, the husband grew up in the rich and noble, and his vision is not that kind of ordinary people. When she looked at the handsome and quiet face of her official again, Miantang couldn't help but soften her gaze. She made up her mind to live up to the trust of the officials and buy a prosperous shop. Kui Sing Zhou spent the night here boringly, and that was enough. After he had breakfast, he ordered a few words to Li's mother at the door of the house, and then got in the car and left. About Lingchuan town, he is still at ease, because in addition to the monitoring of Lu Miantang's mother Li in the house, there are countless secret whistleblowers outside the house. The body, definitely called the thief to come and go. After breakfast, the dark clouds dissipated, the sun shines on the stone road, and the north street is warm and sunny. Lu Miantang followed the local customs, brought the solace of her own shoes, and asked Li's mother to prepare a basket of roasted peanuts, and ran to the alley to chat with those old women and wives. The women welcomed the new neighbors. After greeting each other, they probed to check the needlework skills of the little lady of the Kui family. Seeing this, the women are a little relieved. It seems that God is fair. This little lady Kui's aura is all grown on her face, and there is no pattern in her hands. The stitches are thick, and she is not afraid of smashing the feet of her family officials. Seeing the crude benzine of the beautiful wife of the Kui family, the jealousy of the women calmed down. In addition, the peanuts roasted by Mama Li were delicious. Kind and easygoing. Miantang didn't mention the fact that her husband's shop was bought by her husband. She just laughed and listened to the facts of the popular shops in the town's hot streets through gossip, and by the way asked the shopkeepers who wanted to sell the shop, before bidding geometry. These women were chatting hotly, but Mama Li by the side kept her face dark. The Lord intends to use this woman as bait, but what kind of thief can he catch sitting at the gate of his house? So taking advantage of the time when they went home to cook lunch, Mama Lee said to Mian Tang, "Madam, the first batch of goods from the owner will be put on the shelves soon. If you don't choose a good shop, I'm afraid that there will be nowhere to put the goods." Mian Tang smiled sweetly at her, "No hurry, I already have some ideas in my heart. I will go to the town in the afternoon to see it, and it will not delay the official affairs." After she finished speaking, she went back to the house to look for the clothes to wear when she went out to look at the shop in the afternoon. Mother Li looked at Lu Miantang's excited look, and she actually sighed deeply. After all, this girl is actually a child of a good family. If she hadn't been robbed in the first place, she should have been married and become a mother in peace early in the morning. She has served this woman for a year, and she also knows that this girl has a good temperament. Now, seeing her simple-minded and wanting to do business for official people, it feels like watching a tragedy. I hope everything goes well. Lu Miantang can help the prince to capture the thief as soon as possible, and then see if the prince can be extrajudicial and spare her this hard-working girl. But when Li Mama saw Lu Miantang after changing clothes, she was really taken aback. Although Lu Miantang didn't have any new clothes in his suitcase, he didn't need to choose such worn-out ones to wear, right? If she was not mistaken, that dress seemed to be a dress worn by a mute woman when she was hanging in the yard to chop wood. "Madam, you are..." Before Mama Lee could finish her sentence, Mian Tang interrupted her, "If you choose to buy things and dress brightly, you will become a fat man to be slaughtered. Sheep. If you have coarse clothes, put them on quickly." Mother Lee couldn't, so she could only answer her words, changed into some worn clothes, and went out with Lu Miantang. In the morning, the old ladies mentioned a few well-located shops, but Miantang took a few glances and left. Finally, when she came to East Street, she suddenly took out a long towel that covered her face and blocked the sand, covered her face, and instructed Mama Lee to cover her face before walking forward. After walking a few steps, it was a narrow shop with a sign for sale. She looked up and down and went in to inquire. The shop owner saw her dressed in shabby clothes at first, and thought she was just here to buy fried cakes, but she didn't expect that she would bring up the matter of the pan shop, so she couldn't help looking up and down suspiciously. However, this little lady is good-looking, and the attitude of the store owner is calmer, and she is not directly dismissed as a beggar. However, the price he said was really out of bounds, and at first glance, Lu Miantang was not regarded as a real buyer. Miantang smiled calmly and said, "To tell the truth, my family is in the business of living funeral paper, and I don't need the grandeur of the store, just hang the word Dean to solicit, it's just a neighborhood. Otherwise, you won't be interested in your old and worn-out shop. If you give the price honestly, I can make the decision for the officials today, sign the land deed, and receive both money and money." The shopkeeper frowned when she heard this, and then suddenly her eyes lit up. "Is this true?" Lu Miantang smiled slightly, "No joke. It's just a small business, and I don't have much money on hand. Please give me an honest price. Will be defeated by the prodigal mother-in-law." The Lord clearly told her that she wanted to do the porcelain business, but she was blindly coveting the cheap and bought this pickled and narrow shop. And in the morning, those old ladies also said that because this fried cake shop had a gap with the adjacent bakery shop, they almost killed him a few times, so they had to sell the shop and set up another shop. Place. But because the store next door is notoriously arrogant, and people who know the truth don't want to be next to the bad neighbor, and no one will come to buy it, so it has not been sold. In the end, after Lu Miantang did her homework, she was eager to buy this kind of stuff that no one wanted. It's a pity that the dustpan she baked peanuts. However, the king's purpose is to use her to lure thieves. She loves to lose money, just enjoy herself. Mr. Li glared at Lu Miantang secretly, then she didn't say anything, just watched her negotiate with the store neatly, and then found a guarantor, and bought this place at a very low price home shop. The reason why the price is low is not only that Lu Miantang is good at bargaining with both soft and hard skills, but also because she says that she is in the business of dead people. The owner of the fried cake shop has repeatedly been defeated by the evil neighbors. As far as the seller's business is concerned, he is also willing to sell it to her at a low price. At that time, the Big Diane character will be hung on the door, and then the paper cowboy will be placed, to see who will go to the next door for breakfast. Just thinking about it makes me feel relieved, so this store is very refreshing. Besides, after Lu Miantang signed the title deed, it was already sunset. Lu Miantang was afraid that her husband would come back suddenly like last night, so on the way home, he sold 3 caddies of pork belly at the butcher's shop, and went home and asked Mama Lee to cook it. But there was still no knock at the door of the house. While Lu Miantang was lost, he instructed his mother to hang the braised pork in the well, so as not to spoil it. He would eat it when the husband returned. And she still eats dried radish with rice for dinner, because she is really hungry, so she scoops up the broth bibimbap to eat, and it really makes the dried radish much more delicious. Just a few days later, the meat could no longer be kept, and there was no sign of the official Kuiju coming back. However, the news that the fried cake shop was sold to a dead man has spread like wildfire, causing the shop owner next to the fried cake shop to curse at the emptied shop every day. Lu Miantang took Mama Lee out again today. But this time, she dressed neatly and went straight to the bakery shop next to the shop. After entering the door, she looked at the store and asked, "But your store is selling?" The shopkeeper said in a vicious voice, "It's not my house, it's the next door, it's already sold. If you don't buy anything, don't block the door." Lu Miantang was not annoyed when she heard this, but said a little regretfully, "Mr. Feng Shui said that this corner of the town is very popular with my officials. How could it be bought by others? Then may I ask if your store is available? Willing to sell?" The wicked neighbor was quite impatient, and wanted to shoo people out immediately, but after turning his eyes, he changed his mind and said, "If you buy it, how much will you pay?" Lu Miantang looked at this small shop and came up with a price that was lower than the one she bought from the fried cake shop. When the evil neighbor heard this, he was not satisfied and said, "My lady is joking. Don't sell it at such a price." Lu Miantang didn't care much after hearing this. "It doesn't matter if I don't sell it, I came here for the first time, but I just listened to a Feng Shui master. If you offer a fair price, I will save the trouble and buy it, otherwise I will have to inquire again. At least I have to know what business is on the street, otherwise there is a rush to make a living. Isn't it bad luck? I'm afraid that the store will not be able to sell it." Hearing what she said, the wicked neighbor's face suddenly became a bit difficult. "I think you are also a cool person, little lady. To be honest, there have been bids before. If you buy it with integrity, it's really annoying. If you buy it with integrity and sit down, I'll discuss it with my mother-in-law to see if she likes it." Lu Miantang's seemingly unintentional words just touched this pain. The old signboard of the fried cake shop is still hanging next door. In a few days, when the paper goods of Niu Tao Ma noodles are displayed, his shop will be greatly affected. Taking advantage of this foreign woman's confusion, selling it to her at a price, it would be serious to find a new shop myself. Finally, seeing Lu Miantang arguing all the way, Mama Lee bought this shop at a price similar to that of a fried cake shop. Now she also understands the ecstasy array placed by Miss Lu. This is her idea of buying 2 adjacent stores from the beginning, and then getting through the idea of combining them. Although I bought 2 rooms, but because it is too cheap, it is very suitable to be together. Even if the cost of reconstruction is included, it is cheaper than other prosperous shops. When Lu Miantang finally got both land deeds, he breathed a sigh of relief, smiled and said to Mama Lee, "Fortunately, I did not disgrace my mission. I finally bought the shop. I have seen it before." Now, these 2 houses were originally a house, and the partition wall should be added at the back. The original owner divided it into 2 and sold 2 copies. So it should be easy to dismantle it. After washing and painting, the husband can use it. And, she pointed to the river behind the store and continued, I heard from the neighbors that day, the king of Huayang built water conservancy recently, and the inland river behind our store will lead to the newly built canal, and there will be more ship traffic in the future. It's convenient, and the mule carts don't need to be bumped to transport the goods, and it also saves the precious porcelain from being broken by the bumps. Mother Li listened silently, but she really admired this little lady in her heart. Although her needlework is unsightly, she does have some business acumen, and this shop is very clever. Unfortunately, her husband is not a real businessman. Thinking of this, Mama Li suddenly sighed slightly, and sincerely felt sorry for this helpless and intelligent girl. The author has something to say. Miantang, little lady, serving her husband, managing housework, very busy every day, very happy. Kuiju, why do you cover your face when you go out on the street? Although Zhenzhou has recently built water conservancy, many people have not thought of the reason why the land is connected by inland rivers. If her master is really a businessman, she can sit and wait for the price of this remote shop to appreciate. Lu Miantang was talking excitedly, when she heard a playful laughter from outside the shop. Juliet, you have this good wife, and you will be rich enough to rival the country just around the corner. Lu Miantang looked up, and it turned out that Zhao Shanai, who treated her, was standing side by side with her husband Kuiju. They are both tall and handsome men, dressed in brocade clothes and jade crowns, which are really provocative. Fortunately, this is a remote alley, otherwise Kuiju alone would have caused passing girls to stop and look. Lu Miantang hadn't seen an official for a few days, and when she met here at this time, she felt a little surprised, and hurriedly came over and saluted the two of them. How did the official and the genius doctor come here? Already? Zhao Chuan replied with a smile, I went to Lingxian with Kuiju to visit friends. When I came back today, I happened to see you leading the craftsmen here, so I also came to see. Zhao Chuan looks at Lu Miantang now, and the more he sees it, the more comfortable he is. Although there are many wives and concubines in his mansion, they are all able to spend money and cannot manage them. His first wife is the daughter of An Kuagong. She is dull, influenced by her mother, obsessed with Buddhism. If it wasn't for An Kuagong to stop her, she would have decided to become a nun before marriage. Those who study Buddhism pay attention to being peaceful and open-minded. But his virtuous wife is good, she has learned to go crazy and ignore worldly affairs. After getting married, there is no husband and wife interest at all. Zhao Chuan is not as pleasant as a wooden fish in her eyes. There is a mistress who spends all day in the Buddhist hall, and the chores of the Ho residence are also a mess. Therefore, Lord Zhao thought about it. If he begged Lu Miantang to come back in the future, if he was as smart as her, he would definitely be able to support the general affairs of the Ho residence. Miantang smiled reservedly when she heard this. Afraid that officials would be in a hurry, after the shop was set, Miantang hired a few craftsmen from the West City to prepare to repair the house. In order to save money, she and her two mother-in-law do a lot of labor-intensive work. Therefore, the shop is a bit messy for a while, and it is not easy to sit. Miantang looked at the white shirts the officials were wearing today, which were spotless and not suitable for staying in a shop where the smell of soot was cautious, and said, I'll ask Mama Li to come back first. The house is cooking, and the officials can bring Zhao Shanai back to the house to rest first. However, Zhao Hui had some secret plans in his heart, and then looking at Mrs. Miantang, he naturally brought a bit of distress towards his own family. Seeing that after she turned back to the store, she took the skirt up and tore the old oil paper on the wall, Ho Ye immediately rolled up his sleeves and said, Lu Gu. Madam, come down and rest, I will do it for you, that's it. Speaking, he rushed forward and tore up the oiled paper. Seeing that the Ho Ye had climbed high, the servant who followed him naturally had to watch, so he also went to help. Kui Xing's whose servant Moru brought a chair from the shop and placed it in front of the door for the prince to sit in peace. Kui Xingzhou did not sit down, although it was early in the morning and the streets were very quiet, but if he sat down, wouldn't it prevent Lu Miantang from seducing the enemy? But he looked coldly at Zhao Quan's unusual diligence and ability, but he could understand Zhenyi Ho's mind. I was really fascinated by Lu Miantang. Thinking of this, he raised his voice, "Brother Zhao, the chess meeting is going to be late." Kui Xing's voice was not loud, but those who knew him should know that he was not happy. Only then did Zhao Chuan remember that he and Kui Xingzhou took a simple walk today, and they were going to meet the lay Buddhist Dongzi who came here for a while. Zheshi Dongzi has a eccentric temperament, but he is very skilled at chess. So Marquis Zhao hurriedly pulled out 2 more pieces of oiled paper, and smiled apologetically at Lu Miantang, "I'm busy today, I'll definitely come to help you later." Lu Miantang smiled and wrapped the blue scarf tightly around her head and said, "You are so polite, doctor, how can I bother you with such rough work?" Zhao Chuan jumped off the table, took the wet wipes and tea handed by the servant, and sincerely said, "I and Zhu are as close as brothers, and you are also a magic doctor, so-called let's call my name Jiao." Lu Miantang smiled, but how could she just call the surnames of officials and friends? So she changed her mouth and said, "It seems that Mr. Zhao is short of water in your life." The name and the name complement each other. After the two got back into the carriage, Lord Zhao was still not satisfied, and frequently looked up at the beautiful woman who was standing in front of the shop to see off her husband. It was not until the carriage turned a corner that he reluctantly retracted his head. Kui Xingzhou felt that it was necessary to wake up his friend who had gone astray, so he said lightly, "Master Ho has a good heart, but it doesn't have to be too much. You must know that the woman is the family of a rebel after all. Must be implicated." Zhao Chuan didn't like to hear this, so he glared slightly, "The good family that was robbed by the thieves, what kind of family is the family of the rebels? When this matter is over, you must uphold justice, my lord, and return Miss Lu a fair one." Kui Xingzhou felt that her friend was a little ignorant of the world, so she didn't want to talk nonsense with him. She just picked up the scroll that was set aside, flipped through it, and said gently, "Her father and brother are all guilty and have already homeless and stigmatized. She is not allowed to live in the world. If she helps this king to make great achievements, I will reward her with some silver taels, go to the temple and become a nun, and live the rest of my life in peace." Zhao Chuan was challenged by his wife who was obsessed with Buddhist scriptures, and now his head hurts when he hears the word Mioan. He finally fell in love with a woman, but Kui Xingzhou actually had to send it to the temple. Zhao Hui felt unhappy at the moment, thinking that maybe his friend didn't understand his thoughts towards that woman, so he was so cold-hearted, so he said, "Zhu, you are also a good thing, and you will soon be with him. Lian's second cousin got married and made a beautiful couple, pity me for having a family name, but no one cares about the warmth every day, the only thing missing is the lovely girl like Lu." It's a pity that this was said, but no one said anything. The king of Huaiyang leaned on the cushion of the carriage, rested his forehead with one hand, and read the book seriously, as if he was not very interested in the good things he was about to approach. The second Miss Lian mentioned by Zhao Chuan is actually Kui Xingzhu's mother and the niece of the old princess of Chu. In those days, the old prince was romantic by nature, but after the old princess passed the door, she had a bad relationship with the old prince. After 6 years of marriage, there was only one daughter, but no direct son. The old prince Kui Xia waited impatiently, so he took 3 concubines, took turns to sit in the village for 4 years, and gave birth to 8 concubines. In the 7th year, the sesame oil money donated by the old princess moved the concubine. So although Kui Xingzhou has the title of the first son, he is the 9th oldest brother in the family. The concubines were from good families, and they all had sons in their houses. The open and secret battles in the palace are comparable to the deep of the palace, which is enough for storytellers to speak rotten. What's more important is her son's success. In short, when the old prince passed away and Kui Xingzhou inherited the title, there were only 4 brothers left on his head. When it was time for Kui Xingzhou to get married, the choice of the new princess was naturally cautious. The first is to be gentle, not domineering. He is not good at femininity, and does not want to marry a concubine. Finally, at the suggestion of the old princess, he chose his cousin Lien Lilan, who had a temperament like his mother. Lien Lilan is the sister of the old princess, the second daughter of Zhao Chu's family, and her father is Lien Hans Han, the uncle of Zhao Chuan, the Marquis of Genese. So Miss Lien Er is not only Kui Xingzhu's aunt's cousin, but also Zhao Quanho's uncle's cousin. Kui Xingzhou and Zhao Chuan are also added to the table, breaking the bones and connecting the tendons. Cousin Lien was sitting on a lot of excellent cousins back then, and she almost dazzled her eyes. In the end, she chose a handsome prince like Kui Xingzhou, and she envied the young ladies of other families. Unfortunately, nothing is perfect. Miss Lien's grandmother choked on peaches 2 years ago and died suddenly. This kind of accident caught the children of the house by surprise and failed to avoid the mourning period and get married early. The wedding of Lien Lilan and Kui Xingzhou had to be postponed for 3 years. 2 years have passed now, and after another year, the Huaiyang Palace will welcome the hostess. However, the old princess of Chu often misses her future daughter-in-law, and because she is lonely without anyone to accompany her, she often brings her to her palace. Kui Xingzhou didn't question her mother's decision, and she didn't want her cousin to be criticized before she walked in. Therefore, when Lien Lilan was a guest at the palace, he avoided returning to the palace, lest he would be passed down as a private party during the filial piety period, smear each other's reputation, and give advice to officials. In all, he has not returned to the palace for half a year. After this chess meeting, he will rush back to attend his mother's birthday banquet. The chess game with Shanren will be very enjoyable. Kui Xingzhou is a master at chess. In his spare time, he doesn't like the hustle and bustle of banquets. The rumors of impeachment against him for having self-respect for his troops are getting louder recently. Long Live is also waiting for him to personally hand in the military talisman and disband the local army. Kui Xingzhou was too lazy to deal with the verbal temptation of a bunch of bureaucrats, but got along well with casual people like Zhao Chuan and Dong Chuan layman. After the half-day chess meeting, the layman Dong Chuan, who did not like to boast, praised, "I haven't seen you for a few days, King Huaiyang, your move has been a little bit tricky, and your opponent, when it's really fun." Speaking, he took out a remnant of the chess manual and said, "I would like to admit defeat, I will lose you 3 times in a row today, so I will give this rotten chess manual to the king, but this peerless chess manual has been handed down to the world, now only the version is left. If you can find the second half in the future, I hope you can give me a red." Kui Xingzhou smiled and agreed. However, such rare chess records can be found but not sought after. Kui Xingzhou didn't know if he could find the remnants of the second half, but the long-cherished wish of lay Buddhist Dong Chuan was fulfilled. Kui Xingzhou got his favorite chess score, and the trip was a success. Mother's birthday banquet is 2 days away. In the past few days, distant relatives and friends in the palace have come to the palace, so he has to go back to welcome the guests. So after leaving the mountain villa of Zheshi Dongzi, he and Zhao Chuan, the Marquis of Genese, went down the mountain to transfer to the canopy horse with the famous brand of the palace, and returned to the palace together. Huaiyang Prince's mansion is not far from Lingchuan town, and is separated by a water in Zhenzhou County. Although the old princess' birthday banquet has not yet begun, it is already night, but there are still people in front of the palace gate. The prince finally returned home, and everyone in the palace was full of energy and came to greet the prince. The first thing Kui Xingzhou did was to see his mother. Because she knew her son was back, Princess Chu, who always went to bed early, also sat in the hall, accompanied by Lien Lilan and her mother, waiting for Kui Xingzhou to come to greet him. The eyebrows are more handsome and compelling. Lien Lilan shyly and timidly looked at her future husband, pursed her lips slightly, and waited for her cousin to come over. However, Kui Xingzhou didn't look sideways, and didn't look at his cousin. From childhood to adulthood, he was not familiar with this cousin who was 4 years apart. Fortunately, the way of husband and wife is to treat each other as guests. Just like that Lu Miantang, as long as she is respectful to her husband, even if she has nothing to say, she can get along smoothly and safely. Kui Sing Jo has no interest in the thrush after marriage, but thinks that his wife's respect is the first and foremost important. On this point, a lady like Lien Lilan will definitely do better than a fallen daughter like Lu Miantang. After greeting her mother, concubine Chu said warmly, "I haven't seen you for a long time, why do you seem to be thin? If you are not busy with official business this time, you should stay in the palace for a few more days. Lan's craftsmanship, the tonic soup she simmered for me is very healthy." Li Lan listened to her Aunt Chu's praise, she smiled and said softly, "It's the concubine, you don't dislike Li Lan's hands and feet, I know my cooking skills are not good, how dare I dare to face my cousin ugly." Concubine Chu looked at Li Lan's modesty, and smiled at Li Lan's mother and sister Lien Chu who was sitting beside her, "Look at how this child Li Lan is so humble, but it doesn't look like you at all." Concubine Chu is telling the truth. When her younger sister Lien Chu was at home, she was always biting her nose and fighting for the best in everything, even after marrying and raising children. No convergence. However, the younger sister's daughter, Lien Lilan, was an elegant and gentle girl who matched her son Kui Sing Jo very well. Kui Sing Jo didn't come home for a long time. After greeting his mother, he sat for a while, gossiping with his mother and aunt. But it won't last for a long time. He and Li Lan are still married for a year, so let's let Li Lan's maid Lien Xiang go to the prince's side first to serve him, at least he can take care of everything, right? The number of ways the maid will go first is beyond expectation. Listening to my aunt Lien Chu's intention is to send Lien Xiang first to be Kui Xing's maid. Concubine Chu glanced at Lien Lilan who was sitting beside her. She didn't seem to be surprised, just bowed her head slightly and didn't speak. Then she glanced at Lien Xiang again. This girl's appearance is also correct, but compared to Lien Lilan, it is a little worse, and she doesn't look like a coquettish way. At this time, Kui Sing Jo said, "I often walk around the barracks, it is really inconvenient to bring a maid, and the servants around me are also dedicated, and my aunt doesn't have to worry about me." Hearing the prince's refusal, Lien Chu did not let go. Lien Xiang is not one of those servants who are pampered in the mansion and become the master, the prince can rest assured and order, in the future, you and Lilan will become relatives. She also served well, just to help Li Lan and take care of your daily life, right? Tai Fei Chu was soft-hearted, so she listened, she felt it made sense, so she also persuaded her son, "Since it's your aunt's kindness, let's agree." But Kui Sing Jo didn't seem to want to let go, he just held up the teacup on the side, lightly rubbed the tea lid, and seemingly inadvertently changed the topic and said, "A few days ago, my soldiers followed. I saw Uncle Lien's servant in Lingchuan town, and I thought I was going to buy china, but I don't know if I can buy something I like. Would you like me to choose a few for me?" The only thing is that they were all taught by the concubine herself. How can style and carefulness be compared to a frizzy person like Lien Xiang? Speaking, she softly talked about the incident where she accompanied the concubine to the temple for fasting yesterday. When it came to the funny place, the concubine Chu was so happy that she couldn't help laughing. As for sending off the maid, it was interrupted just like that. When Kui Sing Jo got up, he said goodbye to his mother and returned to the study. Lien Chu also took her daughter to say goodbye and returned to the courtyard where Lien Lilan lived. After entering the inner room, when there were no other people around, Lien Chu suddenly became annoyed, stared at her daughter and said, "It wasn't agreed in the morning, first send Lien Xiang to Xingzhou, it's good to know what's going on over there, so my sister was relieved at last, why did you stop it later?" Knowing that the old prince, Kui Xiat, had a disposition, he insisted on not marrying, and his parents had no way to do it, so I exchanged the marriage certificate with my sister, let her marry Kui Xiat, and let me marry your father. You look at your aunt, if it wasn't for the maintenance of her parents' family, she would have been dragged and eaten by those foxes for a long time. Where would there be a comfortable life for the concubine now? Her bad things in the past can't be compared to the quietness of our house and life. If you don't have a good heart, you will repeat the mistakes of your aunt, and at that time, your father's official position will not be able to help you. Listening to her mother's boast, Lien Lilan, who has always been gentle in front of others, gave Lien Chu a light look in disapproval. Lien Chu didn't notice her daughter's meaningful glance, and said to herself, "Now I see her only son's good temperament in boating, not his father's rambunctious appearance." "You got married. How did you know that Xing's child quietly set up a house in Lingchuan town and raised an outer room? Isn't this the old prince who passed away? If you don't take precautions early, you will be the one who suffers. It's gone." Lien Lilan let Lien Xiang remove the hairpin for her, and said softly, "Mother, how many times has my daughter told you, don't be too explicit? Today you listen to cousin's words." Obviously, he noticed that his father's servant Shimo was inspecting the outer house in Lingchuan town. If you are eager to shove people into his place, wouldn't it be obvious that you want to put eyeliner? According to your cousin's temperament, how can you tolerate this? Lien Chu knew that what her daughter said was reasonable, but she was not reconciled. Then let him keep the outer room? Where should our Lien family's face go? Lien Lilan said calmly, "Didn't Shimo find out about Shi Yinzi? She said that the little woman was a businesswoman who was robbed by bandits, and somehow got her cousin's eyes. This kind of smeared name is just to tease the elder brother to relieve the boredom. According to the identity of the cousin, no matter how much you dote on it, it will not be on the stage. Since it is something that is boring in private, why bother annoying your cousin and making him annoyed?" Lien Chu actually wondered why her daughter was not like her, impatient, so calm. But Li Lan was right. Today, the prince suddenly mentioned her husband Lien Han's servant Shimo, and he was beating her. This nephew of hers looks warm and polite, but she is not as soft as her sister's temperament. When the little servant went to inquire again a few days ago, the soldier whom he had bought had disappeared. Now that I think about it, according to Kui Xing's temperament, the soldier must have been punished, and it is impossible to say anything more. Lien Lilan, when she was jealous at first, also wanted to understand. She will be the mistress of the palace, the concubine of the house, and some ways to deal with the little woman in the outer room. Why did he make his cousin unhappy before the ceremony was done? In this case, she should not know. With such a filthy reputation, it would be better for a woman to serve his cousin, but it would be better for him to be like the old Huaiyang king who had provoked the daughters of other families and carried a few concubines who could not be beaten and scolded. Thinking of this, Lien Lilan gently advised her mother to go to sleep. And she also covered her face with pearl ointment, tied her hair with a veil, and fell asleep. In the past few days, Lien Lilan has been taking extra care of her. Just because the soldier said that the businesswoman was very beautiful, it was inevitable that people felt a little uncomfortable and aroused the heart of comparison. However, no matter how beautiful it is, it will fade away. As the head lady, she should be more open-minded and not short-sighted like her mother. Although the mother just now scolded the old prince for being fussy, he must not marry. But in her family's mansion, her mother cried and regretted how many times, nagging about her father's mediocrity, and only said that she was obsessed with her mind. Why did she have to marry her sister easily? When my father chose a husband for their sisters, he also saw that Chu's temperament was soft, so he looked for Lien Han, a straightforward and honest son-in-law. The smooth and flattering in the officialdom will never be the case. For many years, he has been guarding the place without moving or rising. Kui Xiat, on the other hand, was originally just a military envoy to guard one side, but he made extraordinary achievements and was awarded the king by the emperor. Expand. Lien Chu's bowels were regretful in private, and always said that if she didn't change at the beginning, she would be the head mistress of the palace now. Mother's grief and grievance subtly affected Li Lan, so Lien Lilan chose the former without hesitation between her cousins Kui Xingzhou and Zhao Quan. There is no other reason. Zhao Quan's temperament is too similar to that of his father Lien Han's Han. She doesn't want to be like her mother, looking at the glory of others and complaining all day long. Because she had already figured out cousin Kui's temperament and preferences, she knew that he liked women who were gentle and understanding, filial to their mothers, and put their aunts first in everything, winning the concubine Chu the love of her, finally being able to marry into the palace, can be regarded as making up for the resentment of her mother's life. Thinking of this, Lien Lilan's heart was relieved. She felt that she really shouldn't have persuaded her mother before, and took the inferior route. It's getting late, she has to go to bed quickly, she will be refreshed tomorrow, to please her future mother-in-law, and to let her cousin see her virtuous virtue. Because the concubine's birthday banquet was imminent, Kui Xingzhu's long-married sister Kui Fu also returned to her parents' home with her 2-year-old son Jin'er. Her husband is the son-in-law of Duke Qing, and the mansion is also in Yanzhou, in another province. It is not easy to come back again. Before rushing to the birthday banquet hall, Kui Fu asked Kui Xingzhou, who specially came to see her nephew Jin'er, and asked with a smile, "You went to Jenny's for business a few days ago, and I asked you to bring it for me. Han Xiangjai's fat powder is back, have you ever bought it?" Kui Xingzhou shook the rattle to tease his nephew, and thought for a moment, "I bought it, and I gave it away as a gift. I'll buy it for you tomorrow." Kui Fu glared at her younger brother. Hang Xiangjai's fat powder must be ordered in advance, because the pollen is mixed with chrysanthemum juice from northern Sichuan before the frost, and it was not ordered this year. I have to wait until the golden autumn of the coming year. Which beautiful woman made my brother Zhou Zhengs always fascinated, and gave me the fat powder I finally settled on. Kui Xingzhou did not expect that the fat powder he gave to Lu Miantang had so much attention. At the beginning, Lu Miantang diligently mended his jacket, but he just followed the etiquette and gave her the fat powder in his arms. Now that my sister is making fun of him about this, he doesn't say anything, just teasing his nephew Jin'er. Kui Fu has a bright temperament and will not annoy her brother because of a box of fat powder. As for Hanjian, whom her brother met outside, she thought she was well behaved and lovely, so she attracted his liking. Kui Fu is different from her mother Chu, she doesn't like her aunt Lien Chu and her daughter who is always asking for cheap. It means that the father is not a good person, and the life of the sister is very hard. Every time this happens, my aunt's words make my mother cry. And now, the mother has finally survived, the younger brother succeeded the king of Huainan, and the aunt moved forward like a different person, complementing the mother's natural fortune, and the thought stuffed her daughter into the palace. Kui Fu was married far away and didn't care about her family's affairs. So Kui Fu is happy to see that Kui Xingzhou has another beauty. However, the siblings were also in a hurry, so Kui Xingzhou went to the front hall to meet the guests. The birthday banquet in the palace is very lively. The water banquet will be held for 5 days, and local famous actors have been invited to the stage. However, compared to previous years, there are still fewer guests and friends who come to the palace to celebrate their birthday this time. Kui Xingzhou understands that this has a lot to do with someone in the DPRK impeaching him for owning troops. Long Life today has always been quite afraid of several kings with different surnames canonized by the previous emperor. Now that the bandit situation in Zhenzhou has greatly improved a year ago, Long Live naturally can't wait to kill the donkey. The wind direction is the most important in officialdom. Now that the spring breeze can't blow the boundary of Zhenzhou, there is naturally a bright mind to understand the holy will, and he is unwilling to come. In all social gatherings, these are unavoidable, and Kui Xingzhou is used to it early in the morning. After the banquet, the tea party in the garden began. The king of Huaiyang went to the study to rest under the pretense of being too drunk. There was no one in the study at this time. Kui Xingzhou was sitting alone at a sandalwood desk, looking at the blue sky beyond the eaves by the window. On the table are several letters asking for relatives. The first few copies belonged to the nephews of the future Yuezhang Lian family. Because it was delivered by my aunt, I always have to admire it. But these few officials are really unbearable, and just now at the banquet, my aunt pushed the sluggish uncle to say that my uncle was not good at being a lobbyist, and he was stumbling and stumbling. Lingchuan town has set up a net, waiting for the rebels to throw themselves into the net. Where is there room for someone to make trouble? This kind of business, he will not explain it to his aunt and cousin. The king of Huaiyang doesn't like women who make their own decisions. No matter whether his aunt's proposal today means Lian Lilan, he will beat the drum for his cousin's family. So he didn't even read the remaining family letters and threw them into the incense burner beside him. There were a lot of guests in the front hall, but Kui Xingzhou felt lazy for a while and didn't want to do human entertainment. The atmosphere of the palace was noisy and lively, but he just wanted to be quiet. So I brought only the little servant Moru, out of the palace through the back door, and got on the boat along the river bank. Although it was spring at this time, it was still cool at night. He drank some wine at the birthday banquet, and when the cool wind blew, he felt a little overwhelmed. The boatman asked the little servant where he was going, and he looked at the prince who was sitting on the side of the boat, but couldn't tell the direction, only let the boatman drive aimlessly all the way. Less than half Shi Chen came to the dock in Lingshui town. Pay attention to his whereabouts, and you can sleep all night. So Kui Xingzhou slowed down and let the boatman dock, and then accompanied by the stars all the way, walked all the way, and came to the north street to lock the door. Let's talk about Lu Miantang. Since he bought the shop, he has urged the craftsmen to repair the shop. It only took a few days to take care of the shop, but the husband did not know where he went with Zhao Shanai to socialize, and he was not seen. Today, when she went to the street to ask the carpenter to come back and build the shelves, she thought that the official should be able to turn back, but at night, the door knocker really rang. Lu Miantang quickly got up when she heard the sound from the door of the house. In the past few days, she was afraid that when her husband came home in the middle of the night, she would be greeted with an unkempt face, so before going to bed, she asked Li's mother to help her braid a long twisted braid on the side of her ear. When she heard her husband's footsteps, she had changed into a fitted pleated skirt, put some rouge on her lips, then pulled her embroidered slippers, and greeted the door neatly with her head and face. Smiled shyly at the official is back. Because it was already dark at this time, Kui Xingzhou planned to sleep quietly in the wing for the night, but who would have thought that Miantang had not slept yet, and greeted him without waiting for him to enter the wing. And not allowing him to speak, the little lady raised the curtain and waited eagerly for him to come in. Although she has experienced some ups and downs in the past few years, she probably has a good appearance and has suffered from the pain of a man, and she has never been made to suffer from the hardships of sleeping in the air. Her skin was white, and her beautiful eyes revealed an unsullied innocence. With such a pair of eyes, people can't help but let their guard down. It's no wonder that the two shopkeepers sold the shop to her at a low price. While thinking lazily, Kui Xingzhou involuntarily stepped into the house full of fragrance. With the experience of the first 2 night raids by officials, Miantang, who thought she was a bride and had to start all over again, has made full preparations. In the past few days, she took Mama Li to buy bacon and prepared enough eggs, grain and oil. Even if someone is hungry at night, they can immediately cut the meat into slices and fry the fragrant rice to eat. In addition, she also bought a big bathtub, but it cost a little to boil water and firewood, so after buying it, Miantang was reluctant to use it herself, thinking about bringing the officials back, and the heat is still boiling. Put 2 large iron pots with hot water, let him soak in warm water and relieve fatigue. So when Kui Xingzhou came in, Miantang happily led him to look at the newly added property behind the screen. The craftsmanship of Pei Niang's family at the head of the North Street is well known, so I ordered one at her house, because they are all neighborhoods. She also charged me half of the money. What? After a while, I will ask Li's mother to boil hot water for the officials to bathe. Halfway through the words, Miantang smelled the strong smell of alcohol coming from Kui Sing Zhou, and hesitantly said, "Is the official drinking?" He was in a dreadful mood today, and he was too lazy to pretend to be a husband. He just wanted to lie down like this, and no one would bother him. If this woman has malicious intentions, this is the best chance. Although Kui Sing Zhou is drunk and worried, he still thinks of this point with self-deprecation. He closed his eyes and listened to the faint footsteps coming from the room. When Lu Miantang walked outside the door, he didn't know what to say to Mama Li, and came back after a while. It turned out that Miantang just went to carry the water basin, wet the towel and wiped Kui Xing's face. At this time, if it was a maid in the palace, she would naturally observe her words, and would not dare to delay the rest of the prince, let alone put the wet wipes on his face without the prince's call. But Lu Miantang is not a maid, but a serious lady who thinks she is Kui Xiang Gong. The aroma of the wine is naturally mellow and sweet in the jar, but after entering the stomach, after an hour or two, the smell will be unbearable.